Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. The head of Uber, I said Uber, we're going to talk about Uber in a moment. Airbnb has been in Paris today. Airbnb, Paris, its #1 destination around the world. And I guess that makes sense when you see that Paris is the #1 tourist destination around the world. He's been in town to talk about issues that have been ruffling feathers both with taxmen and the hotel industry. We're talking about that and more broadly about the so-called sharing economy in the company of Paulin de Menton, CEO and founder of Drivey, Europe's #1 peer-to-peer car rental services, who was telling us earlier that there's room in the market for everyone these days. We're also in the company of Laurent Duc, president of the Hotel Industry Confederation, the UIMH. He joins us from Lyon, in the center of France. Jérôme Leca of a big data company, Scality. Explain to our viewers, what's a big data company?
Scality makes a software that allows any very large company, government, or telecommunication operator to have a cloud storage offering like Google or Amazon that's cost-effective.
Okay. We'll also joined by Emmanuel Vivier, co-founder of the Hub Institute, and Guillaume Gralet of France 24's Tech24 program. We talked about Airbnb. Here, there's another sharing economy brand that's been a lot in the news, not just in France, but all over Europe, in India, in the United States. Uber. With several cab strikes that we've seen over the past year to protest what's deemed to be particularly rough competition for cabbies who, in France, pay between 200,000 and 300,000 euros for their license fee.
The center of this war really is Uber. It's making huge problems for taxi drivers. They're killing an entire profession and taking down 18,000 professionals across Paris.
We don't even understand why Uber Pop exists. It should never have been invented because it's a form of illegal transport. It means we're letting drivers with no authorization transport people around for a fee.
Uber Pop was the low-cost subsidiary of Uber. Paulin de Menton, do you agree with that cab driver, by the way, that Uber Pop shouldn't exist? I mean, these are not licensed drivers. They're not qualified drivers. They're just guys who are saying, hey, if you want, I'll drive you around if you give me some money.
What I wonder is if taxi medallions, so the right to drive a taxi, should exist, actually, because I think taking a passenger from A to B is not such a complex service and should be much more liberalized for the sake of good service, because what the success of Uber shows in Paris is that the quality of the service, there was a clear lack of good service. That's why Uber could take over so fast the market.
I mean, you say the quality of the service, but if you look at the quality of taxis in Paris, it's pretty high by world standards.
Yeah, but maybe the #1 point in quality is being able to is reliability, meaning being able to find a taxi even at rush hours and being treated well by the taxi driver. And I think there could be some progress to be made.
We all know that there were not enough taxis in Paris. It's not like you're discovering this today. I mean, it was a big problem and for several years. So it's improved the customer experience. And the other thing is, I love what it has done to the taxi industry in Paris. They're nicer to people. They have adjusted their behavior. Taxi Bleu and GSUT have come up with apps that are functional. It's now possible to quickly call a taxi from an app. So it has forced an industry that was not moving for many years, although everyone was complaining, to actually catch up. That's great. And if we look at data from San Francisco, where Uber has existed longer, most of the Uber traffic actually doesn't eat from the taxi traffic. It's a different type of traffic. It's new users that were not taking taxis.
How much of that is true, Emmanuel Vivier, that it's not the same customers base?
I think first, when we look at the numbers, there's 140 million shares done through Uber last year. So it's like crazy. It's 54 cities. So they have never forced people. It's just people, word of mouth most of the time, who decided to test and really like the experience. And I think, yeah, it's true in San Francisco. If we take the revenue of Uber only, it's bigger than the size of the taxi market. So they've really motivated more people to use this kind of system than even before. So taxi should maybe thank them.
Guillaume Gralet.
Yeah, maybe there's still something that's missing in the French taxis is the inability to pay with a credit card, and it's a pity because
There are a few, but not many.
Yeah, credit card has been invented in France with Roland Moreno, for example. But the key thing maybe in the future will be to see what Google is going to do with the taxi, because Google invested a lot in Uber, but Google is also investing in a car without any driver. So maybe there's another point of disagreement. Will the taxis or the Uber for the future will have no driver or a driver?
You think the driverless car is on the way?
Yeah. I really believe it.
I think there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And we are seeing driverless cars in the highways of California.
We're seeing driverless cars, and so that plays into what people are saying. This is a type of economy that squeezes out a lot of people.
Our world is changing. Wake up.
And I think when we talk about the new black economy, no, I'm sorry, they are like killing the old black economy where it was not transparent at all. You could not know who was driving. You could not rank them. People, they were not taking credit card because they didn't want to declare all their revenues.
Yeah.
So it's much more transparent. And it's why people love it. User experience is a new killer application.
Laurent Duc, what's your religion when it comes to Uber?
Well, it's exactly the same. You can't have paralyzed when you get a taxi. They've both their job. They pay sometimes 50 or 100,000 euro to be allowed to be taxi, and they've got to pay taxes because there must be a company, or not even a company, but that they're self-workers. They should be on. They exist only in France, artisans to be taxi. They pay for that. There's a number of clauses in Paris, Lyon, all cities, and now you've got a new market. People, they've got no charges. They don't have to buy. They don't have to buy the right to work. They don't have to do nothing. They just come and do exactly the same job. I think they haven't got the same obligation, and it can be so. It's exactly the same price. Because on one side,
I'm sorry, this is inaccurate. First,
I agree.
the license should be free. It's pricey because there is no choice to buy a new one, so you have to rebuy it from someone, and there is artificially expensive license. And VTC have to follow a certain amount of training. They pay the tax. There's a law for that. So yes, there need to be improvement, but it's not like shadow economy. Like
Laurent Duc?
In Dublin, they used to have 2,000 taxis. And they're so liberal, they open the market. Okay, they've got now 15,000 taxis. And they're dying. Taxi drivers are dying. They are fighting. They do 2 or 3 jobs. So it can't be so. At one moment, you can open a market with a previous, maybe too short market. Now, if you open it like that, it's going to be exactly the same message, it's the same way to work. I agree that the service of Uber can be gorgeous according to the bad smile of a taxi, and like us with Airbnb, it should be very nice to be welcomed by a person, and in other way, you get a bad receptionist in a hotel. I know that, but if you go just on a professional way, when you do exactly the same job, you should have the same obligation. You can't have 2 different systems in the same country. It can't be.
All right, Guillaume Gralet, part of this, I'm going to ask you to play sociologist here. We're in France, and we know that the French are very good at a lot of things when it comes to the internet, and they've done many great things, many great sites. You've mentioned them in the past before. But there is this problem, which is not so much with the internet industry, but more generally with regulators and with the view of the general public. And the politicians are only responding to what the public wants.
Yeah, we call that the Uberization of the economy, maybe. And though I would say that French, maybe you tell me what you think, guys, but the French are late and then they come to be in advance, for example, in mathematics schools or thanks to many talents. But at the beginning, the French are very much afraid about what's new, especially today. But I think if you come back to Airbnb again, because I went to an Airbnb room in London with my family, the good thing is you can choose exactly the style. There is a personalization which is extremely interesting, and lots of French, we've got very good taste, should embrace more these new kind of services. The only thing maybe the French are right to protest against are the lack of tax that these giant internet companies do not pay enough.
Recently, Bill Clinton's former labor secretary, Robert Reich, who's an economist, lashed out at the so-called sharing economy, pointing out there's no social safety net or job security in this age of digital deal-making, the way that Guillaume described it. He said there is no economic security, there's no predictability, and there's no power among workers to get a fair share of the profits. You and I and everybody else, if the present trends continue, will be selling what we do to the highest bidder. This is not a Frenchman saying it, it's an American.
The interesting thing, though, is that the only people who are not complaining are the said workers. You can talk to the people who are renting their home through Airbnb or the people who are driving Uber cars. They are very happy. So I really like it when regulators and other industries are complaining for others. They should complain for themselves.
Driving an Uber cab, you don't have the same kind of benefits, you don't have the same kind of medical coverage, you don't have the same...
I'm sorry, in the US, you don't have much coverage when you're a cab
here
driver.
in France.
We're talking about France.
The drivers are very happy. Like it's flexible hours. They don't have to pay this crazy price for the license that should be free. Normally, like the app is like pretty functional, so it doesn't look like they are like in a sweatshop. They are like choosing those carrier, or you choose to rent your Airbnb apartment, and most of those people are happy, and the customer is happy. Like he's talking all the time by choosing those services.
Roland Demonton, let me ask you, because you said earlier that some of the people, it's their trade, they have a few cars and they rent them out and everything, and other people rent their own cars. That second category, what motivates people to rent their own car?
Basically to compensate for the cost of the car, and
but they can't be very happy about it, right?
It's just
you don't want to rent your own car out.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. It's just a much more efficient way to use the car. It's basically a car that sits unused is a form of wasting a very expensive resource. So when you cut wasting, you have benefit obviously on the economic side, but also on the environmental side. And socially, it's quite nice because it's a very local economy.
And how many of those customers are doing it to add a bit of spending money, or how many are doing it really because they really need the money? They're desperate for the money.
Well, I think 95% of the people are really doing it to compensate costs, but before they would not do it just because driving did not exist. And I think overall, when we are talking about lack of Airbnb affecting the offer of housing, it's both Drivey or Airbnb are super efficient ways to use wasted capacity. If we want to solve the housing crisis, we have to look at empty spaces instead of looking at full spaces, which are super optimized in terms of people using the assets.
Laurent Duc?
No, it's too easy. It's too easy what you're saying. Sorry to say it. We are living in a country, and if I'm renting my flat and my wife is going to do the cleanup of the apartment every day to get new customers, I'm covering my wife because my national insurance covering my wife. So it's black market. It's black market. They are doing profit. We are doing profit, and they don't participate on the social insurance. Nothing. So I can't accept that. You can't say it's a new way to optimize. No. I mean, you make people work without any cover. Maybe in the United States it's different. In France, we're covering every people. And we're covering people when they're not working. And if they're working on the side, we're covering them. It's not good. It's not good. It's not fair. that they get money working without paying any insurance and taxes. It can't be.
Guillaume
Well,
Gralet,
it's going to be the revolution tomorrow.
Guillaume Gralet, at,
We all going to
at the end of the
choose- we
day,
all-
this optimization of the economy, as the word being used here now,
Yeah.
is it going to mean more precarious economy?
Maybe in a way, I would say like Bob Dylan's song, times are changing, and so we have to find new ways of being happy. And the thing of people
I
being
can.
unemployed
But
doesn't.
we should have the same rules, no? You can't have two different rules in a country. For one kind of people, they're doing with internet, and so they free of taxes and regulation, and people who are not doing it, and they got to pay taxes and regulation to pay what the other one don't pay.
Yeah,
Not normal.
but very briefly, this week there was the Salon de l'Agriculture in Paris, and you saw all these robots doing all the stuff that people had to do before, but you spend your days in another way, and I think we just have to find other positive ways to spend our time.
Jérôme Lecat, there is this question, though, and that is that these are new industries. We see Paulin here, who is, again, 4 years that you've been in the business for that, in that particular venture, and things are new. Uber didn't exist, 6 years ago?
Yeah.
And neither did Airbnb. And look, at what point, though, do you say, okay, let's let them grow? And at what point do you say, okay, stop, we need some rules and some regulations, and now's the right time to regulate?
Well, first, I would not oppose both of them. I think that we need to let them grow, and I think that we need to make sure that everyone pays the proper taxes and have the proper checks so that we can track who rents what and who drives whom. And actually, I now feel a little bit more secure in a Uber than in a cab, because the Uber, I can really track the driver. If I have a complaint, it's really easy to do. And in a cab, I know I can take a picture of the cab ID and blah, blah, blah. I don't even know who to call. Uber, it's super simple. I just send an email to Uber, and they do respond, by the way, because I've done complaints and they have responded. I think that fundamentally, we're in an economic transition. Okay? There was a time where there were millions of workers in the fields, and then there were millions of workers in factories, and the jobs in the field disappeared because there was automation in the field. And then there was millions of workers in service industry, and the jobs in the factories disappeared. And right now, we have millions of jobs that are going to disappear from the service industry. And new forms of jobs will appear, and they will be different. They will be as different from industry to agriculture or service to industry. And we can just, close our eyes and say it will not happen, and it will just happen in other country, and we'll be late. Or we can embrace it. And again, the workers in that new age, they're happy. I mean, I talk to every one of them every time I rent an Airbnb, every time I rent a Uber. They're happy people. And by the way, about the cleaning on the Airbnb, I've never seen that it's the wife cleaning. In most cases, it's a paid maid, and she earns a living, and she's declared. I mean, it's just a different form.
Emmanuel Vivier?
To me, the precarious one looks much more like the taxi driver for now. They have hard time earning a living. Most of the money goes to tax, to paying for the cost of the license that should be free. And I think, yes, things are changing, but it's not totally unregulated like it has been portrayed as sometimes. Just new rules need to be set up because it's a new economy with new way of doing.
Laurent Duc, after that meeting that took place at Paris City Hall between the boss of Airbnb and the leaders of City Hall in Paris, what are your thoughts? Can there be rules that can be spelled out that can make everybody happy?
I just said it from previously. That. I'm not proposing two ways of consuming for consumers. I mean, for consumers, they want to go by private apartment. It's a different way of hospitality, and I'm not against that. I just say, for the same job, we should have some obligation, same taxes, and it can't be an open market because it's funny. It should be a real work, and it should be taxes like that. There's no reason we should pay tax, and they can be free to do anything.
And the others should be free. Paulin de Menton, final word on this. Have the rules changed in the 4 years where you've been running Drivey? And is it properly regulated? Is it better than before? The same? Different?
The regulation did not change a lot. Basically because there is no big need for regulation. When it's really sharing goods, not for profit, but just to compensate for part of the cost, there's not much regulation to be said. Now, if these platforms, marketplaces are seeing some professional use, then definitely I think that there are some rules to be set up, and it's starting now. The debate is starting between sharing economy companies, for example, in Paris, and the government and fiscal authorities. And I think we are the first ones willing to have a clear regulation and rules, and I don't think it's going to slow down the movement. Well, to the contrary, everybody enjoys when the rules are clear, basically.
All right. As Guillaume Gralet said, the times they are changing. I want to thank you for being with us. I also want to thank as well Paulin de Menton, Emmanuel Vivier, Jérôme Lecade, and as well Laurent Duc for being with us from Lyon, France. Stay with us because our Media Watch segment is next. All right, we make room in this Airbnb discussion for James Creedon. How are you, sir?
Very well, Francois. I'm just trying to find the pages that actually are relevant to this story. There we go. First of all, there is a certain amount of discussion on French media about the arrival in Paris today of Brian Chesky and the fact that Paris is now the #1 city in the world with Airbnb services. You can see 40,000 active listings. So it's beating New York, it's beating other top spots around the world. And that's merely, I suppose, a reflection of the fact that Paris is the #1 tourist destination, right? So that's, I suppose, not surprising. Meanwhile, of course, the Airbnb and their dynamics with Paris City Hall and authorities, that's getting a certain amount of attention as well. Airbnb trying to make doe eyes at Paris City Hall, says this headline. And the ambiguity of their relationship with the French authorities is being expressed in this headline here. Paris extending a welcoming gesture, I suppose, to Airbnb, while also promising to open its eyes. So this is a reflection of what Bruno Julliard, the Deputy Mayor of Paris, said to Brian Chesky, that on the one hand, yes, we're delighted, we're proud of the fact that Paris is the top destination. It shows the attractiveness of the city, but we're going to be absolutely strict when it comes to accommodation or housing being affected by apartments being rented out on short-term rentals. So those issues certainly getting a degree of attention. And what else is there? There's not a huge amount of buzz on the story, I have to say. It's more of a, I suppose, a news or technical story.
I want to put a question about that to Guillaume Gralet. How would you say the reporting has been on Airbnb generally?
Do you mean positive or negative?
Well, just do you feel as though the journalists are in sync with what is the heart of the matter?
I think that quite good, but it depends really on the age of the reporters, I would say. Young would prefer Airbnb, and maybe older didn't try the
service. Yeah, an age gap on that.
Well, I think with these apps generally, whether it be Uber or Airbnb or whatever, there is a sort of a cool factor where the facility of the usage of the application, has a trendy aspect to it. So the legal questions are less present, I think, than the trendiness. And in any case, I suppose, in terms of regulating these companies, if you ban them, as has been attempted in the past with, for example, Uber in certain European countries, well, others are just going to come in and take their place unless there are really strong measures taken across the board. This is an article in the New York Times from earlier this month, giving Airbnb a run for its money, and it shows that it's one of actually just a plethora of companies functioning in the same, I suppose, sphere, preferredresidences.com, for example. And so I suppose it's the case of the landscape having changed, and you can see there are consultancy companies which are putting links up online on social media as well, trying to gear, or I suppose, direct hotels in the same direction to take on Airbnb at their own game. You can see one consultancy here with an article that's been
And again, this is what the taxi industry has done in Paris with Taxi Bleu and G7 coming up with apps that are totally competitive to Uber.
So I think it's a case of the landscape that has changed, and are the traditional industries, such as the hotel industry, such as the taxi industry, going to have to play
certainly having to
up
roll
their game.
They have to roll with the punches. I want to thank you, James Creed. Now, once again, I want to thank our panel. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.